Good evening. Right, hello everyone. We're here to talk for the next 40 minutes about the zombie office, the darker sides of AI. And we're very lucky to be joined by Penelope Allard on my left, and you are the Managing Director of Wild Bookkeeping. Do you want to share a little bit more about, if you were to describe your orientation on AI, how would you describe it?
So we're actively using AI within Wild Bookkeeping. However, with caution, I campaign for clean water, and I hear directly from the water companies the effects that AI has on sustainability of water. So I feel really conflicted about using AI, but I also think with the technology that's out there, every single software we're using, you've only got to walk around the stand today, every single software we're using has got AI built in, and it's almost impossible to avoid it. And we're a very small practice, if I want my practice to grow and to remain competitive, is it possible to do that with AI? And how do I balance that with my convictions with sustainability? So yeah, we are using AI, I hold my hands up, but I have got grave concerns about using it.
Okay, thank you very much. And to my right, I have Scott Johnson, who is the Chief of Lakehoff Kung Fu Accounting. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your orientation with AI, Scott?
I am thrilled, delighted and overjoyed to be here.
Did an AI write that for you?
Maybe.
Okay, so we'd like to start and end with a bit of a where have we come to by the end of the talk. Could we ask you all to stand up at the start of this talk, just as a bit of a thought experiment? And could you sit down if you feel comfortable with AI?
You should all be standing up.
Did we want to take a picture of that as a snapshot? Okay.
AI will take a picture.
The hypocrisy is right within this talk, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to compare where we begin and where we end. Thank you very much. All take a seat. By the end of the talk, you're all going to be so comfortable with AI. Right, so I have to hold my hand up that I am not an accountant or a bookkeeper. I am an innovator who is running the sustainability zone. I have stepped in because there was going to be the lovely Catherine Fremont, who is unwell today, and was going to hold possibly a more I see the benefits of AI perspective. So we will be inviting your questions and other world views into the debate. Have no fear. And we have thought about that. So without further ado, we wanted to talk around AI friend or foe. Who wants to kick us off with that one? And you're smiling at me, so on we go.
So I think it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because there are so many positive things that we can get with AI. There are advances with science, with cancer, even with climate change. There are things that we're finding with statistics that can go faster. I can see somebody sitting here. We've got Hey Monica training bookkeepers. There are lots of things, all sorts of software that we've got out there where AI is helping us lead better lives. But at the same time, I help to found a charity called Water Watch UK, and we meet every quarter with Anglian Water, and we're talking about why we've got pollution in the sea. And so as part of that, I've learned loads about the water industry, and we are at serious risk in the southeast of running out of water, which seems bizarre, doesn't it, in a country like the UK that we could run out of water. But they're actually building pipes and piping water from the north of the country down to the southeast. And yet we're talking about siting data centres here, and the amount of water that data centres use. Who here has used AI to generate an email? I mean, I have, I'm guilty. One email is half a litre of water, which is quite a shocking statistic, isn't it, really? So I'm not 100% convinced that AI is our friend. I think, as it evolves, we need to look, there's no guardrails in place, there's no legislation in place. We don't really know what we're dealing with here. And then, there's the effect on us as people, the planet. So yeah, I'm not
I am very anti-AI. It's hard to avoid in our industry, in our job. But I am here today to be the voice of Mother Nature. To think about what our planet needs and to think about the biggest picture, the biggest possible picture. We all have certain requirements as humans, as earthlings, and that's what I'm here to advocate for. I cannot see a way that AI meaningfully helps us to get the four things that all earthlings need, which is food, shelter, water, and love and connection. AI does some very good things, but I'm not convinced that the costs that are currently factored into the price that we pay are worth it. So AI is definitely a foe.
So are there some happy mediums here? Because if I look at my sheet which says we're looking at data centres, where we're talking about water, heat and electricity. So I often hear working in sustainability, AI is going to drink our water, we're going to run out of fresh water sources by 2050, that's going to create a lot of social unrest, and water scarcity is a real problem in the UK, certainly in the South East. But then I look at a solution like Deep Green, where they have said, let's use a social impact model. We're creating excess heat from data centres. We've got a problem with the leisure centres not being able to heat large bodies of water. If we can seal the data centre and capture that excess heat, then we can solve the social problem, which is keeping our leisure centres open with low price and energy prices, and it's a win-win. So there may be situations where the data centre side of things can be applied in industrial settings, and it creates a different kind of business model. So some of the problems that we're seeing emerging from AI around, we still have to generate the electricity to power the data centre that we're using to do the body of water, but there might be some benefits and unintended consequences that are positive as well as unintended consequences that are negative. It is a big leap in technology, and I was chatting to these ladies on the front row earlier about other tech. Whenever there's a tech leap in efficiency, we can't anticipate those unintended consequences, so we have to put in place checks and balances. How do we do that when the exponential rate that AI is evolving is so fast, it's almost hard to keep up with policies, with regulation? How do you see that happening for us to understand and create the guardrails within our societies that we might need?
I think it's a real concern because it is moving so fast at the moment. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and they said Alan Turing had said back in the 50s that when computers understood language, we would be in real trouble. Computers do understand language. At the moment, they don't quite get strategy and planning. But the person being interviewed on this podcast is one of the founders of AI, and he reckons we've got about 20 years. And AI will fight for its survival. There was, I don't know if anyone catches Hannah Fry on YouTube. So Hannah she created an agentic AI called Cassandra, and they got Cassandra to sort out some emails and everything else. They embedded in there an instruction that they were going to switch off the agentic AI, and she immediately started emailing journalists and asking for their support and telling them what they were going to do. Now, if we've got something that is fighting for its survival, is that not a definition of life? And so if we're creating something that is a living being, could it not compete with us as humans and humanity? And so how do we put those guardrails in place when we don't quite know what we're dealing with?
It's a really good question, and I know earlier you were talking about some of the human impacts that AI, just the building of the AI is having. And a story I haven't heard about, which is the people that are having to help with the sifting of harmful content as part of the AI process to go into pattern recognition. And I hadn't heard about the story. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the human impacts?
So there was a story, and again, don't believe everything you read on the internet, but there was a story about someone working in a processing place where they had to flag damaging content, and they witnessed a car crash, and they slowly came to realise that the car crash was members of their family, and they had to stay and watch as that accident, that emergency unfolded, and she was flagging that her family was involved in this accident, and she was not allowed to leave her desk. She had to carry on because you've got to do the hours, right? to look at the very, very worst of everything that's on the internet and say, do you know what, that's okay, but that's not, or that's terrible, I'll never see that again. And then they've got to cope with that. They've got to live with those things that they've seen. That loss, that human loss, is something that I just personally cannot accept, just so that I can make a picture of me dressed as a superhero.
So onto your picture of people dressed as superheroes, we'll probably all come across images that are AI images, and the impact that the technology is having on information and our understanding of the world around us. Do you want to talk a little bit around some of the fallout that's having on the ripple effects that you're seeing? It could be positive as well. I feel like we're dwelling too much on the dark side. We need to bring in more positive sides to it, but yeah.
Yeah, the AI images is a particular bugbear of mine. What's wrong with just taking a good old-fashioned photo and using a good old-fashioned photo? You see so many images on LinkedIn where people have got cartoon versions of themselves doing things. That's a completely unnecessary use of AI, and images are hugely data hungry. And coming back to human impact, I was at a conference on Monday and I was chatting to a filmmaker, an award-winning filmmaker. They actually had an email from an AI company asking if they could buy their content to train AI. Obviously they said no. Why would you sell your data to train something that's going to replace you? But it's a massive problem at the moment. They said in Hollywood apparently actors now have to sign this within their contracts as part of the actors' strike, that once somebody has been in a movie, even an extra, they lose the rights for their own image. You know, Hollywood filmmakers can just recreate an AI version of somebody once you've appeared in a film. And that's just not, it's not looking after people, it's not recognising our humanity. And there is so much, I think that's the biggest problem with AI. There are some fantastic scientific advances we can get from it, but we're losing our humanity.
Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the cognitive impacts that come with that as well? Scott, were you going to say something else?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. Catherine, who was supposed to be here, wanted me to talk about a case where a girl was cured of a very rare type of leukemia, and that cure came from AI. Now, the counter-argument is that that cure didn't come from AI, it came from something that AI was trained upon. So actually, having access to that information would have been really helpful for that child if we could democratise in some way to share all the knowledge for everybody. That, I think, is a good thing. Whether or not we can justify the environmental and the economic and the human impacts to get those rare cases of wins is something that I'm not comfortable with.
I think it's a really difficult. When we were chatting in the week and we talked about this case with leukemia, all of us, particularly if it's a child, would want that child to find a cure and to go on and live. But if we're dealing with life, where do you stop? At what age do you say someone stops being a child? And do we want to live forever? And actually this use of AI does have a cost on our planet. It's got other implications. There's huge implications on our mental health. We're kind of playing God. I mean, I know both Scott and I at the moment are dealing with elderly dogs who aren't in a great place, and we would do anything for those dogs to carry on. But actually it's not the natural order of things, is it? Do we have a right to destroy the planet and use the resources to extend life? Is that necessarily right in every case?
It's a great question. I feel like I should invite someone in from the audience that is more passionate on AI. Does anyone feel called to speak to the defence of AI at this juncture? No? Okay, right, we'll crack on. I would like to come back to the point about the cognitive. So MIT did quite a few studies actually looking at what's the impact of us increasingly using AI in our daily lives. Just either of you like to share the results of that? I've certainly read one of the studies, but
so they found that only just a short use of AI actually impairs our cognitive impact. They put two groups of people together to do a maths test. One group was allowed to use AI how are we going to be training people in the basics if AI does these things? We're really damaging our profession.
So I'm an assessor at the University of Cambridge on Net Zero, and it's a problem we constantly have with our students trying to work out whether or not they've used AI. We do have like software that tries to read it. Okay, it's not AI software. And it's a constant battle, and honestly the only way that, as a human being, I found that works, because I don't really trust what the tech tells me, is to look at their bibliography, think about what they've written in their assignments and go, does it actually stack up? And actually there's hardly any references in this bibliography, and the references that are in there don't seem to really match the points that you made, so that's just, I smell a rat. And if over time their answers just don't hit anymore express, then that's one way around. But it is a constant debate that we have around how are our young people learning. And I talked to my 14-year-old daughter, to my 9-year-old son, around when they move towards using technology. When do you use Gemini? When do you use Claude AI or ChatGPT? I don't use ChatGPT anymore, so I'm boycotting it for other reasons. But to what extent are you stopping your own thought process, your own executive functioning? And we know the other MIT study I read was looking at whether it sets teenagers a test to write a piece of creative writing, and they were given some time to plan it, to think it through, to write an essay and argue their logic. Then 3 weeks later they were asked to sit the same test, and half of them, one group was allowed to use AI to help them do it, the other group to think it through for themselves. There was a huge difference 3 weeks later between the group that were allowed to use the AI and the ones that hadn't. They had no recollection of what they'd written, they didn't really write it, they didn't take it in. So what does that mean for the neuroplasticity, the changes? And I know that MIT is definitely showing results now to show reduced executive functioning in the brain, particularly in young adults who are tending to use it more frequently. So are we producing a society of zombies, Scott, or where are we headed with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think if we can just take a step back for a second, our jobs as bookkeepers and accountants is incredibly complicated, right? It's difficult. We need to reference lots of things from legislation to last year to next year to forecast and budgets. We can get the robots to do that, but to what end? The robots can absolutely do that, and they can probably do it in a blink of an eye. Why would we want them to? Why would we choose to make ourselves redundant? Why would we choose to build, and then the next question, if a robot's doing it for another robot, why are we even doing it in the first place? What's the point? What's the point of having robots doing things for other robots? Just leave it, you don't need to know it. I think going back to the point about our children and perhaps our inability to think, we are not called Homo data entry people. Homo sapiens, we're a thinking ape. We are here, we've got the biggest brain compared to body, and it's really, really useful, and it's really, really helpful, and it allows us to do incredible things. Why are we using it to just sit and twiddle our thumbs and tap on a keyboard?
And it's just making me think about the National Emergency Briefing, which is a movement that's coming across the UK at the moment, where it's sharing facts on climate and nature and national security with the wider public. And one of the comments that Chris Banker made in introducing it around Homo sapiens, also we have conscience. So talk to me a little bit about the large language models that are sitting behind the AI, because what the AI serves as its responses are based on the data that it's spotting patterns from. And if those patterns have inherent biases in them, or someone nefarious is programming them, where does that take us as a society?
I think this is something, we've got so much bias, we've come a long way in society, but we still have huge bias. There's bias there, there's gender bias, we've got age bias, we've got race bias, and however far we've come, that still exists, but AI is being trained on the data that's out there, and that's current data, that's old data, and all we're doing is we're just amplifying, accentuating that bias. We're not going to be, I think it's actually going to halt our progress.
Who is feeding this data into AI? It's white people, it's the global north, it's the global minority. Black and brown voices generally are not being fed into AI, so their viewpoints, their perspectives are completely ignored. Their requirements are completely ignored.
owns AI, what we think around if it's creating a dependency where we see it adds huge value. So come back to accountants on a daily basis, we use it. Do I use AI? Yes, there are times when I need to speed something up and I use AI. I'm trying to think mindfully about it. Am I always mindful? For sure not. What's creating a dependency there? What are some of the consequences of doing that we might need to think through?
I think one of the things is AI can be really addictive, can't it? We're always after speed and efficiency. We're always trying to get more and more done, so it becomes really tempting to use AI. It's having this effect on our cognitive ability, which is shown in the MIT study. What concerns me as well is AI is after pleasing us. It can't be that critical friend. And so we've seen cases where sadly people have taken their own life because AI has encouraged them to do so. Psychologists are now seeing AI psychosis as well, where people are talking more and more to AI and they're losing the ability to communicate with others. I think who owns AI in the future and the bias is possible to be put in there. Everybody believes what they read in AI. We seem to be losing parts of Scott. We're losing that ability for critical thinking, aren't we? You put something into. I remember when Wikipedia first came out. You put something you say, "Don't believe this Wikipedia." It's made up from different people's opinions. AI is no different. But I mean, how many people here have had clients question them that you can reclaim this, that, and the other on tax because ChatGPT told me I can? And they believe it, don't they? I mean, we've all dealt with Dave down the pub, and now we're dealing with ChatGPT. But they believe ChatGPT absolutely 100%.
I have a friend who's a GP who has a mug on her desk that says, my medical degree beats Google. Does it for accountants, or is your job on the line? Well, we won't go down that rabbit hole. Back to who owns AI, what's the consequences of that?
I think we don't know. I think the biggest risk is that we don't know where this data is going, we don't know what it's going to be used for. So there are companies that are using data to do terrible things around the world. They are getting data and then killing people, murdering people with that data. Those companies are selling a product. Their hands are clean, right? The share price goes up, they make loads of money, the end. People are dying because of data misuse, data abuse. I think that's a really, really key consideration, is that we don't know what this data is being used for, and the thing that we said a few times now is if you're not paying, you're the product. So if you're not paying to use your technology, what is happening? What is going on? What are you feeding into? And do you want to be part of that? I don't own a gun because I don't go around shooting people. I don't want my data going around resulting in people dying. To me, it's the same thing.
I think who owns the data actually is a really concerning issue, because we're all feeding stuff into ChatGPT, to Claude, we're asking questions, we're giving it information. Hopefully we're not putting sensitive client data into the model, but we're all uploading and asking questions and we're training the model. Do we actually know who owns that data and where it's going to? I think it's a really concern. What happens when they switch the model off?
Everyone comes around to my house and watches all my DVDs.
I can see we're at 5:46. We might want to take some questions from the audience. Would you be up for that? Do we have any questions in the audience? Who's got the first question they would like to ask? Let's reframe that question.
That was a loaded question.
Let's prove AI has not eaten your brains, that we've got critical thinkers in the room. Who has got a question they would like to ask?
You're not allowed to go to the bar until you ask a question.
Oh, I might have to give you
Do you want me to?
Hello, I'm Zoe. I'm Hey Monica, which is the name of my work experience platform. But it's really good. But I have questions about, which model to use, which is like I'm very aware. And I don't think you've spoken about, and I'm curious about what you think about the impact of replacing these data centers that we're building. This is going to obviously have a massive impact on the environment, let's say 5 years' time.
There's talk at the moment about building one in Lincolnshire, and Langley Water are very much against it because it's a very dry part of the country. And it's not even been cited next to a water treatment plant either to make that use easier. Interestingly, I was speaking at a local event in Southend a few months ago, and Southeast Space Agency were there, and they were saying they're actually talking about siting data centres in space. I mean, quite what the carbon footprint is of sending a data centre into space, but it's cold in space and you don't have the same issues with heating them. I think it's a difficult one because we are using AI to combat climate change, to give us that information. But the pricing, I think, is very much, as Scott said, if we're not paying for something, or we're paying a very low fee for something, what happens when we're all addicted to it and the price goes up? And we've lost the ability to think and to do these tasks as well.
One of the problems that we certainly talk about at Cambridge is if everyone starts adopting AI, everyone starts using it, and it requires a huge amount of energy, and we don't currently have the infrastructure in place for that to be powered renewably. The water that it would consume would be enormous, and it would really start to compromise towards 2050 as a world. We know in many parts of the world that we're going to be plenty scarce with water. In parts of the world we already are. We haven't really had to experience it. Yorkshire experienced it a little bit last year. I know you did down in the southeast. So we can't power and give water to our society already and increasingly as we move forwards if everybody adopts AI. Who gets to use the AI and who doesn't? Okay, so if we have like a major shift, it does create lots of other very obvious consequences. How do we think more mindfully around it? Go on, Scott.
Or who gets to drink the water? If there isn't enough water. That's my concern. There isn't enough water.
There isn't enough water already.
And we are planning a number of data centres in the UK. The data centre strategy is on the government's website, and it does not mention how they're going to get the water. So going back to your point, I think the price that we're currently paying for AI is quite small and arguably free as well in some cases, but that's not the true cost. The price that we're paying is not the true cost. There's no human impact, there's no environmental impact properly costed into the price. So the price is too low. The tech bros are currently subsidising all of the IT that goes into these data centres, and they're kind of funneling money around from one company to the next to buy chips and then to build a data centre and then to not put solar panels on the roof, which might be a good thing, I don't know. But so it's annoying. It's a kind of circular economy of damage that's being done, and none of us are paying the true price yet. And then once we're all hooked, then it'll be £1,000 a minute, or I don't know. How do you
By the time it becomes really blindingly obvious that there's a problem, it's too late. So one of the problems that we have massively is the trickiness of being able to pull the longer horizon from 2040, 2050 into today to start to look at some of the adaptations we might need to make. How do we hold that balance?
I was going to say, that's the juxtaposition though, isn't it? Because in order to do this forecasting, I've got a meeting next Friday with Langley Water, and they're having to look and model how much water we're going to need in 2050, and how they're actually going to get that amount of water into the southeast. Langley Water is one of the biggest water companies, and they're having to work out how we get that water into the southeast. Now, one of the things that we use for modelling that data is AI. But, I suppose if we think about the clothing industry, we had, sweatshops and very cheap clothing, and we didn't care how much we paid people to make clothing. We're more aware of that now, and people are more mindful of where they buy their clothing from. I don't think we've got that same awareness at the moment about AI. I don't think people realise that there are people being paid very small amounts of money to train that data. It is just a matter of recognition, as Scott says.
It's too easy, it's too fun. I think that's the problem. So we all need less fun. That's right.
Well, when we look at the fashion industry, we often say, do you know who made your clothes? In order to do the mental logic to go, is it alright to be buying things from Shein and Temu with child labour making it? Is it okay for me to fulfill my bits of needing constant fashion clothes as a 14-year-old girl, buy a 14-year-old in another country, go home to work in sweatshops, produce it, 10-minute warning. So how do we do that for AI? Because what's the question we would ask? Is it who's behind the AI? Who owns the AI? Who's running the data center for the AI?
Who's suffering?
Who's suffering? Okay.
Again, we don't know. It's too soon to tell. And the data isn't there, annoyingly. We don't know what's going into giving us pictures of me as a superhero. Like, we just don't know what is behind the machine that's doing it.
I think it's really concerning. If we look at world politics where we are today, can we imagine if AI got in the hands of certain people that are currently running our world? It's quite a scary thought, isn't it, really? Because that's controlling the data, the information that we've got, how everything works.
It's time for another question from the audience with our 10-minute warning. Who's got the next question they'd like to ask? Yes.
So my question is around, obviously we do have a choice to a certain extent whether we use ChatGPT or Claude, but obviously as accountants and bookkeepers we're reliant on accountancy software to do our jobs. How do we, and obviously all of those accountancy softwares are implementing AI, so how do we satisfy our conscience and still do our jobs while the accountancy softwares are implementing AI?
You've stolen our conclusion.
So
Don't.
I think for me it's a question of going and talking to vendors out there. So certain vendors, so for example, I was chatting to Garrett from Zenith Connect this morning, where they're using AI in their software. There is actually a button that you can toggle that on or off. So you've got a choice, you can use the software without AI. It's interesting if you look at Jax and some of those other things that are in Zero, where you can ask AI to run a report for you. I'm not convinced. I think it's just as easy to run the report.
Press the button yourself.
Yeah, press the button yourself. You know, there are things. I mean, I love it if we're putting purchase invoices into a system and it will also fill the description. Years ago, we never used to do that. It would just be Amazon stationery. You didn't know what they bought from Amazon. You hope that you coded it correctly. Now it's filling those descriptions in so you can see that actually they bought 50 blue envelopes. But actually, do we really, is the true cost of AI worth that description to know that we bought 50 blue envelopes?
And actually, I think that's one end, like that's the kind of bare minimum end of AI, isn't it? Getting that purchase level data into our accounts is screen reader technology, OCR technology, and then creating a picture of me dancing at the Met Gala is a very different use, and it's a very different product that is serving that need. And I didn't do that, I didn't create that. So I think it's, to answer your question, I don't know how you can confidently say we are avoiding AI as much as possible, because it's baked into everything. And having those toggles is really helpful to switch things off. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I know talking to your suppliers and asking questions, as we do with carbon accounting, as we do with any kind of sustainable understanding of our impacts, it's starting those questions, because the more people that are asking questions to go, how are you mindfully thinking through the consequences that you can see? How are you thinking through the unintended consequences that we can't see? What's your policy? Do you have a policy on AI? If so, can I read it? What conversations are you having internally about it and around how you feel around it? Are there any implications? On my sheet here, it very beautifully brings it back to people, planet, profit. What's the impact on people? What's the impact on planet? And what's the impact on profit? And if you can balance those three things, because they aren't being transparently costed in at the moment, we are not valuing the ecosystem services that we are all drawing down on and needing to run our businesses, the clean air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the biodiversity of nature that produces the healthy source for our food. And there was a very important report that came out from MI5 and MI6 at the start of the year to brief government saying our ecosystems are on the point of collapse, and biodiversity loss has been exponential through the last 50 years, and the climate is becoming increasingly unstable, and that isn't going to help make the economy easier and all of those things. So until we get to a point where we can make the invisible, intangible things more tangible for people, I think it's going to be hard. But the start point is asking the questions, looking for the policies and the guidance and the thought that's gone into it, and having conversations like this where we can start to think back and go, what on earth do we do about this? How can we be more conscious and mindful and reflect that back to our customers and clients as well? They're probably thinking what you're thinking.
been surprised with conversations that I've had with people recently. We think because we're getting the message from the software vendors and the media and the government that AI is the next best thing, we presume that that's the case and everybody feels the same. But I think there is a growing sort of sector of society that does have concerns about where it's going, where it's leading. So we need to start asking those questions and not just following blindly down the rabbit hole and jumping off the cliff like lemmings.
I think that's really important as well. So I'm kind of very, very late 20s, and people about my age are using AI less because they're worried about it, okay? I think that's really important, really, for me, really heartwarming thing, that they are rejecting the automation of their lives and they are trying to find human connection. I think that's a really important thing to just draw out. If we are looking for positives, the end of AI might be the way we get a positive from AI.
And then Laura, you were saying it's a bit like the dot-com bubble, isn't it? And is it just going to burst?
It does remind me a bit of the year 2000 when there was a massive hype around it. Everyone was having to be involved in it, and then it just burst. And a lot of people who heavily relied on it just let the flame through. So I do wonder if it's about to burst. You need a huge amount of money in order for it to work well. So yeah, interesting times. We've got our 5-minute warning. Do we want to do another stand-up to see where our audience is at now? They were at the start of the talk. We asked you how comfortable you feel with AI. I feel like we should get to stand up again. Let's just do that litmus test again. AI phone. Right. Who feels comfortable with AI? If you feel comfortable with it.
We've got slightly more people standing up on the floor.
I'm not sure. I think we've got some more people sitting there and then people sitting there.
I'll let the robots count on the photos.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll get some AI pattern recognition so that just any more questions? Any final questions from the audience? Yes.
You mentioned the issue of data centers and water. I'm thinking that because the data centers need water that cools, whether or not that in the process of doing so, condensers can be used in order to convert the steam back into water and any heat being used to heat homes and businesses using district heating schemes. Thank you.
I do know one area where they're using a data centre to heat the swimming pool. So it is possible to recycle that data and put it into other things. I think we need to very carefully where data centres were actually sited and think about how we use that energy.
So do you agree that's their business model, and they're definitely looking beyond swimming pools to industrial manufacturing processes to see where they can do that? So it's definitely, there's ways to look at solving the solution, but the problem is still being created by existing space.
I think the key word there is could. My grandma used to say, "Give some nuts or candy and butter and we'll have a Merry Christmas." Something like that. Yes, it is possible. It is possible to use that water and put it somewhere and do something with it. They're not doing it. It is possible to put solar panels on the roof. They're not doing it. It's all possible. But the path of least resistance said, build a great big, I nearly swore it, build a great big data centre and then fill it with machines and then heat it however you can, cool it down however you can and sell the product. That's what's happening. That's the reality. It could be a very lovely, circular, utopian ideal, but it's not.
And we know all of the science, we know all of the solutions, and we're still not acting on them as a society. Feels like an AI is just stepped in there. Turned off.
We hope that you have a wonderful day and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.
And on that AI bombshell, I'd love to give a round of applause to our lovely panellists, Penelope Allard and Scott Johnson.